A lot of decisions made at the top have not been internalized at the bottom. I think that what has happened is that decisions about structures have been made at the level of heads and have been handed down, but they haven't yet permeated at the bottom. And that is a political failing. And those politicians who made those decisions need to understand it was their failing. And we cannot resolve that overnight. So it is not just a question of putting structures in place and signing agreements and so on. There must be some fundamental substratum of consensus in our society.
You try with a federation, the whole thing end in confusion. CARICOM and then CARIFTA, but somehow a spelling disaster. Mr. West Indian politician, I mean you went to a big institution, and how come you can't unite 7 million? When a West Indian unity, I know it's very easy. If you only rap to your people and tell them like me, them is one race, the Caribbean man, from the same place, the Caribbean man, that make the same trip, the Caribbean man, on the same ship, the Caribbean man. So we must push one common intention, is for a better life in the region, for we woman and we children. That must be the ambition of the Caribbean man, the Caribbean.
Regional integration in the Caribbean has been an ongoing process since colonialism. The colonial British government aimed at reducing administrative costs in the colonies and aimed to secure one government. Between 1697 and 1958, several attempts of regional integration were made, however strong opposition erupted from citizens and Caribbean elites due to their political and economic interests. For instance, in 1871, the Federation of the West Indies surfaced, and the Coastal Union Commission of 1933 recommended the Leeward and Westward Islands form one colony under one governor. This attempt was faced with several social issues influenced by the Moyne Commission and World War. National movements for self-government and social issues such as labor conditions and poverty became intense and widespread. These factors were partly responsible for the formation of the West Indies Federation in 1958. The Federation's goals were to organize a single political and economic unit, separate from the British. However, there was an increasing gap between the West Indian population and their government that led to the collapse of the Federation of the West Indies in 1962 and the rise of CARIFTA in 1965. CARIFTA's existence was influenced by foreign exchange and boosting local industry. CARIFTA emphasized on increasing and diversifying trade between islands and promoting individual islands. At this time, the Regional Development Bank was created to oversee regional trade. There were concerns between the more developed countries and less developed countries, whereby the Regional Development Bank played a fundamental role in monitoring trade benefits and distribution of benefits between these countries. Trade increased between the countries by 65% between 1967 and 1970. The result of dealing with these affairs, along with other social and economic issues, led to the upgrade from CARIFTA to CARICOM.
The Caribbean Community and Common Market CARICOM was established by the Treaty of Chaguaramas signed by Barbados, Jamaica, Guyana, Trinidad, and Tobago on July 4, 1973. The treaty came into effect on August 1, 1973. The CARICOM member states include the more developed countries, Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and the less developed countries, Antigua, the Bahamas, Belize, Dominica, Grenada, Haiti, Montserrat, St. Lucia, Suriname, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. The CARICOM associate members are Anguilla, Bermuda, British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, and Turks and Caicos Islands. CARICOM sought to establish political, economic, and social regionalism in the Caribbean. This task has been difficult for CARICOM to attain. Between 1993 and 2000, the Treaty of Chaguaramas was revised due to the transformation of a common market and economy to a single market and economy. The Caribbean single market and economy aimed at deepening the economic integration, widening of membership, thus expanding the region into the global trading and economic system. Although these objectives sound fascinating and promising for Caribbean economic, political, and social developments, the reality is CARICOM has several limitations that hinder a true regionalism, including all aspects of Caribbean society. This is evident in Norman Girvin's article, where the CARIFORUM Group and European Union were faced with divisive opinions regarding the Economic Partnership Agreement. The EPA is one of the largest trading blocs in the world. Its relations are between Europe and the 76 developing countries of African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group. In theory, the EPA agreements aim to facilitate development and reduce poverty in ACP countries. In actuality, it did the opposite. Girvan argues that the EU brought the EPA agreements to secure markets, natural resources, and investment opportunities for developed countries, while the ACP countries remain underdeveloped and continue to struggle. Girvan's example of the CARIFORUM EPA negotiations between 2004 and 2007 were approached protests and criticism by NGOs throughout the negotiations that eventually led to the opposition from Caribbean officials and civil society. The concerns were primarily the process and content of the EPA. The EU threatened to impose tariffs on ACP countries that did not sign the negotiations by December 2007, thus put immense amount of pressure on CARICOM leaders, except for Guyana. Guyana was politically isolated and continues the battle with the support of civil society. Opposition continued during 2008 and civil society was essential in establishing the renegotiations of the agreement. CARICOM has operated in the interests of political elites and foreign countries while disregarding civil society. Civil society plays an eminent role in regionalism, and without their participation, Caribbean regionalism will face further challenges.
Since the EPA, our private sectors and civil society have been clamoring for greater participation in negotiating trade agreements. These agreements are often undertaken in their names with their interests at heart, yet most times they may not be aware of most of the intricacies involved. We as representatives of the people have a duty to ensure that their wishes are observed. I wish to implore you to insist that before signing off at every crucial juncture in these negotiations, officials must brief us before the final decisions are made, and that sufficient time is allowed for consultation when necessary and practical.
Civil society comprises of the actions of different kinds of NGOs, social organizations, and movements, which challenge regional governing bodies such as CARICOM and CARIFTA. The primary role of civil society is to foster Caribbean cultures, social and political characteristics that are distinct to Caribbean communities. Civil society emerged out of the impacts of regional integration and globalization. Historically, its weakness lied in the fact that Caribbean civil society lacked institutional provisions that allowed for implementation on a societal level. It is the formation of civil society such as the Caribbean Policy Development Center, CPDC, that has created a linkage between theory and practice that CARICOM's regional integration approach independently couldn't do. CPDC acts as a networking agency for NGOs in the region that identify with common needs. Their mandate is to inform NGO members of ingrained systems of oppression. CPDC diverts the focus from the individual and draws attention to the collective by repositioning the capitalistic mode of operation and have it take a more humanistic approach. Caribbean Policy Development Center, as the essence of civil society, encourages the promotion of a rich Caribbean identity. Program development from beginning to end is consensus-based, involving the voices and concerns of the day-to-day persons. Their administrative effectiveness lies in their NGO members' ability to mobilize members of society and build the confidence needed to influence public policy in the direction that fosters a human-centered approach to development. On the other hand, CPDC's attempt at effective regional integration is hindered by the lack of NGO funding. Another important limitation to NGOs' potency is their ability to work hand in hand with governments and financial institutions and not become a puppet to Western imperialism, which tends to tarnish their reputation in society.
Are we ready as a CARICOM to face globalization, which has already started? Are we? What does the future hold for us? We want to know, and we are very serious about that.
The concept of regional integration in the Caribbean, as we have previously discussed, operates in a top-down manner, with a small number of political elites resting at the top of the pyramid. Civil society, comprised of non-governmental and community-based organizations, as well as the individual citizens of the various Caribbean communities, make up the remainder of the pyramid. The more marginalized sectors of civil society, which includes community-based organizations and the average citizen of the Caribbean community, have been omitted from the process of regional integration. Regional integration as a concept seems beneficial and positive when discussed from the point of view of the political elites and governmental organizations. However, the top-down nature of the process of regional integration has made for extremely weak interactions and interrelationships between the private sector and civil society. In Sovereignty and the Search for Recognition, Ian Boxall discusses the notions of individual and collective sovereignty, expressing the importance of the recognition of the individual within a greater community. His viewpoint offers up some explanation as to why the process of regional integration has failed at integrating those at the very bottom of the poly-socio-economic structure. When one looks at this conceptualization of individual recognition in relation to regional integration, one is able to gain an understanding as to why regional integration has not benefited society as a whole. As Boxall points out in his work, there is a huge disconnection between policymakers and civil society because of the elitist governing model that continues to exist across the Caribbean. This is exemplified in the ways in which smaller-scale rural farmers are disregarded in the establishment of such regional bodies as the CSME. The agreement on which this organization is based is restrictive. It calls for the free movement of only select highly qualified individuals throughout the CARICOM region, which of course excludes the majority of the Caribbean populace. Boxall further points out that many believe that regional integration actually only represents the amalgamation of already failing institutions. As Maurice Burak points out in his piece, The French Antilles and the Wider Caribbean, the political elites of the French Antilles are more concerned with African and European issues than Caribbean ones, again proving that there is a great disconnect between the political elites and the societies they claim to represent. In 2010, the Jamaican State Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Marlene Malahou Forte, while speaking at the EU-funded CARICOM Civil Society Project National Consultation, stated, "Our survivors dependent on us working together." This statement refers to the relationship between civil society and regional organizations such as CARICOM. Malahou Forte expressed her belief in the importance of the role that civil society plays in the future of regional integration, but this expression has yet to be turned into a reality. In order for the needs of civil society to be properly met, the pyramid must operate in a bottom-up fashion, with the greater part of society making decisions and having their voices and needs effectively put into policy by the political elite. Following a conference held in 2002 in Guyana between the CARICOM heads of state and civil society groups, it was concluded that the theme for regional integration in the Caribbean should be "Forward Together." However, once again, as Boxall points out in his article, Caribbean governments have failed at engaging their citizens in the political process beyond the process of voting. There has not been a substantial analysis conducted or input sought on the beliefs and understandings of the individuals, the many people who will ultimately be most affected by the process of regional integration. Studies that have been conducted across Jamaica, St. Kitts, and Antigua have all concluded that there was still much skepticism about the idea of regional integration. Feelings of nationalism were also found to be quite apparent. In a report produced in 2010 by the University of the West Indies Institute of International Relations, which tackled the concept of regional integration in the Caribbean, recommendations were made involving all actors involved and affected by the process of regional integration. The conclusion reached in the report was that regional integration could not be successful without civil society, a broad spectrum of the community, providing the vision for that process. The study of past experiences in Caribbean societies made this conclusion irrefutable. The process of regional integration has been unsuccessful because those in power have failed to have the individual feel recognized in the process. One might suggest that this is one reason why CARICOM might potentially be dissolved.
I